technologies. They have become strategic assets. They shape power relations, they influence narratives, and they redefine what sovereignty means in the 21st century. In this context, today's panel addresses a question that sits at the heart of current global debates. How can Europe safeguard its digital sovereignty while remaining an open, reliable, and influential actor? An actor that sets the terms of the global digital order. In a world marked by geopolitical tensions, tech competition, and diverging regulatory models, Europe is often portrayed as being caught in between. But in our view, Europe is not stuck in the middle. Europe is actually charting a third way, a way that combines innovation with safeguards, openness with resilience, and competitiveness with fundamental rights. This brings me to another key point that I would like to underline today. Sovereignty does not mean isolation. Digital sovereignty is sometimes understood as a call for technical self-sufficiency or even as a withdrawal behind digital borders, but such a posture would be a mistake. Digital sovereignty is not a lonely game. It is, in fact, a collective endeavor. It is about the capacity to make autonomous choices while actively cooperating with like-minded partners who share our values and strategic interests. In a highly interconnected digital ecosystem, influence comes less from standing alone than from building coalitions, shaping norms, and setting standards together. And this is precisely where Europe and Belgium within Europe have a card to play. European values provide a clear direction for AI governance. They emphasize that AI must be safe, trustworthy, and human-centric. AI must respect fundamental rights, reinforce democratic principles, and serve people and societies. Europe has also championed a multi-stakeholder approach, recognizing that governments alone cannot and should not shape the digital future. Industry, academia, civil society, and international organizations all have a role to play. Belgium shares that vision. Our national strategy on AI sets clear priorities: innovation, skills, and strong ethical and legal frameworks. Belgium views AI as a societal project, a project that must deliver tangible benefits for all. At the international level, we strongly support multilateral cooperation, whether at the UN, the OECD, or through the EU and partner countries. We help shape global AI governance frameworks that are inclusive and anchored in shared values. Ladies and gentlemen, today's discussion does not start from a choice between sovereignty and cooperation. Rather, it invites us to explore how the two can be reconciled and how Europe's regulatory strength, market power, and normative influence can translate into real global impact. For today's panel, we are fortunate to bring together a diverse and complementary set of perspectives with a China expert, Pascal Koppen, a US-based AI developer, Grégory Renard, representatives of the European Commission, Juha Heikkilä, the OECD with Sarah Rentorf-Smith, and the United Kingdom with Imogen Schoen, as well as Agoria with Ferdinand Casier, representing the Belgian technology sector. And we are equally pleased to be guided through the discussion by our panelist, Jimmy Farrell from Pour Demain. And we also have in our panel Risto Ook from the Future of Life Institute. Together, our panelists bring a broad range of views and expertise which will help us navigate challenges and explore concrete pathways forward. I very much look forward to the discussion, and I hope you do too. We will now open the session with a recorded intervention by Pascal Coppens. Pascal is a renowned China expert, author, and entrepreneur. He will reflect on China's tech posture, and he will share a unique perspective on the race between China and the US.
Hello there, it's always fantastic to be able to speak at the EU AI Week, but this year, unfortunately, I'm in China. So I'm recording this in order to share my story on how I believe and how I view the race between China and the US evolving today. But I also want to talk about Europe and how Europe has to position and how Europe can stay in the game between China and the US. Now, if we talk about AI, we have to start talking about innovation. In 2015, 10 years ago, this is when Xi Jinping said that by 2020, China will be one of the most innovative countries in the world. By 2030, in 5 years from now, China will be a leader in innovation globally. But only 3 years before 2015, in 2012, we were all very much convinced everywhere in the West, in Europe, in the US, that China would take at least 20 years to become innovative and probably never catch up with us. How could they? Why should they? These same magazines in 2020, just 8 years later, talk about this AI supremacy race between China and the US, where it's not clear at all anymore who's winning, who's losing, who's behind, who's ahead. Now, the interesting thing is just 2 years after 2020, everybody in AI land suddenly was surprised and saw that ChatGPT from OpenAI was surprising the whole world, and basically everybody was behind. Even the Chinese. And China, at that point, many experts say that China was 5 to 6, maybe 7 years behind the US in terms of large language models. If you ask the question, who is winning the AI race? Is it China or is it the US? Well, if you just consider, and I ask this question to hundreds of people every week, and I always get the answer, if you ask the question, who's using ChatGPT, everybody's raising their hands. If I ask the same question, and this is in Europe, who's using a Chinese large language model, then, well, very few people are raising their hands. So it's very clear from the audience in Europe that I see every single week that people believe that the US is really winning this race. And this has a little bit to do with the fact that when we look at artificial intelligence, we still consider the Chinese AI as being the artificial part of AI, meaning whatever happens behind the Great Wall, we don't really understand it, we don't really trust it, we don't really want to know what is going on. Well, the real intelligence for many people in Europe, in the US, in the West is very much AI is developed there because most of the intelligent people are there. This is where things come out. This is what the New York Times was saying very clearly 3 years ago. And so AI has a different meaning. Now, reality is, of course, very different. If you look at reality, then Jensen Huang, the CEO and founder of NVIDIA, said very clearly that 50% of the world's AI developers are in China. And they're all Chinese. And on top of that, you have all the developers outside of China for companies like Grok or Meta or something, or Anthropic. If you look at Grok, for example, from XAI, from Elon Musk, well, 70 to 80% of his employees are Chinese, and they're all AI developers. So most of the developers in the world are actually of Chinese origin. So saying that the US is winning, yes, it's true in some fashion, but it's thanks to the smart people, the smart Chinese that have been building these systems. Now, it's not as clear-cut as that. But if you then look at the DeepSeek moment that just came early 2025, actually DeepSeek was available already for a year and changed a lot inside China, but when it really changed the world's perception of AI coming out of China was the early January in 2025 when Trump just took office. And everybody was saying, how is it possible that a young team of people, of Chinese that we never heard about, that don't have this huge AI experience, can suddenly challenge the US systems? Something must be off. They must have copied something or got some US talent or whatever, but all of that was not true. And they did it with very little computing power, at least the training of the algorithms or the models. And so something was happening. And so people started then at that moment, just a year ago, to start understanding what is really happening in AI land in China. But the other thing that's interesting to look at is on patents. And if you look at the patents or patents, like we say, is that In China, in all the patents in large language model, generative AI models, 70% are coming out of China or are registered by Chinese entities or Chinese people. And that means that this had even, China had a leadership in AI patents or patents just before ChatGPT came out. So saying that China is not leading in AI, if all the patents are coming from China, well, maybe that's not true as well. So we have to be careful on how we express what China is doing in terms of artificial intelligence. Now, if you look at the models that China has today, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of models from dozens and dozens of companies in China, like from Huawei, DeepSeek, Alibaba with Qwen, you have Minimax, you have Zhipu, you have lots of things. ByteDance, of course, they have their system. Tencent, I mean, everybody has an AI system of their own. And all of these systems together is 40% of all the frontier models in the world. So China is almost half of all the frontier models. So why are we saying the US is still ahead? Then if you look at Kimi, one of the examples from Moonshot, I mean, Kimi 2.5 that just came out just a month ago in January, February of 2026, what you see is that they're beating pretty much all the models from ChatGPT, from Gemini, from Anthropic, all the models that we know from the West in many of these aspects. And these are global rankings. It's not the Chinese ranking that did it for China. So Kimi is doing really well, but it's just one of them. There's many others. But if you then ask me, who is winning the AI race? Well, I think the answer is different than you probably would expect. My answer is actually there is no AI race between China and the US. There's no AI race simply because China and the US are running a completely different race. And that different race has nothing to do with artificial versus intelligence. It has everything to do with different A's and different I's. It's firstly, when we talk about China, it has everything to do with accessibility. While in the US, it's all about IP guarded, intellectual property guarded. If you look at the DeepSeek model, it's open source, but most of the big companies in China in AI land, so the tech companies, they all have their own open source system or model that they just give away to people or at very low prices to access in order to get as many people as possible to contribute and also to use them. While in the US, they're building bigger and bigger moats around their big castle in order to protect that IP, in order to build the next big model and the #1 model in the world. And so this is a race for the biggest model against a race for as many different people joining in order to create a very useful model. And so that's a very different thing, the accessibility. Now, the second A has to do with affordability. And this, as opposed to the investment-driven direction from China, from the US, where it's very clear that in China, it's very the opposite as in the US. In the US, it's all about locking people in with subscription models, because if you don't get people in a subscription model, they pay $20 a month, then how are you ultimately going to get your billions and billions of dollars of investments back that you made into the infrastructure of AI, in the models, in the chips, in the hyperscalers? Well, the Chinese, very often they're looking at a low-cost Ryanair type model where they want to get as many people on board to get on to basically take that plane off as quickly as possible and as far as possible. Now you could ask yourself, yeah, but don't these Chinese want to make money? Of course the Chinese want to make money. They love money. But that's not the point. They're looking at a different market, and they are in a different market. They're looking at the next opportunity. And the next opportunity is actually the Global South. And in the Global South, where 80% of the world's population lives, including China, it's 84% in total, well, that Global South ultimately doesn't have the same means very often as the West has to pay the $20 every month. And they're trying to find cheaper models. But the interesting thing, when your market is 4 times bigger than the European and American market, you can also lower your price because you have a larger market. And the Chinese have a market of 1.4 billion on itself. So a very different logic. Now, the third A has everything to do with applicability, and that's very clear. If you look at China, most of what they do, engineering mindset, is really to apply AI into the industry, into the ecosystem, into systems, into basic basically everything that people need to use on a daily basis, as well as businesses. Well, the US is very much going into infrastructure direction. If you look at the US, it's very clear it's all about hyperscalers. It's about more and more compute power, more and more clouds, more and more basically energy that is needed to run all these centers, because they have a very horizontal model. And that horizontal model means, like ChatGPT or many others like Grok and so on, you can ask any question you want and you can always get an answer. Well, the Chinese didn't always get the same access to chips. And so what they started to do, they started to go very vertical, because they couldn't get all the people to line up the funding, the chips, and all these things, all the system, the middleware, the software around it. They didn't get everything from NVIDIA and from the US, so they had to go and be inventive. They had to create something new. And this was the ingenious of really optimizing the stacks. From a chip point of view, I mean, the stack is much better built very often, the Chinese chips, to access it, very much accessing the memory in an optimized way, but it's also in the models with DeepSeek that has its own trained model, which is many different, in a very different way than the US had. And that was the DeepSeek moment that we saw. And I could go on and on and on, but it's really very vertical. And that means that it's optimized for one application or one industry or one specific case. And this is where China goes, but then in parallel with millions and millions of cases. So they go this very, very fast. And because they do it fast, it's really very tailored to that environment. But what you see is that the reason of this application happening so fast is because the trust in AI in the global south, and specifically in countries like India and China, is much higher than in the West, in Europe, and in the US, but specifically in Europe, where we don't always trust the AI because we're worried it's going to do bad things. And maybe it will, but that's not the question. The question is, do you have enough trust to build the applications? But it's also about trying and daring to do things that nobody else would even think about. They're having applications in their mind that you would say, this is mind-boggling, this is risky, this is something you shouldn't do. But that doesn't matter. It's not that they want to deploy this on a global scale. It's that they're testing and trying and failing constantly, and they fail fast in order to learn and in the next step do something better. And so the fourth and last A of AI and I of AI that I want to talk about is about augmented versus imposing. And this is very interesting because this is about the government. And if you see how the government in Beijing looks at AI and Washington looks at AI, it couldn't be more different. In the US, it's all about a competition. In the US, it's very clear that it's a winner-takes-all mentality. The AI action plan says it literally, if you read it, that it's about the US has to win. If they're not going to win with the best models and the best hyperscalers and basically having it over the whole world implemented, then ultimately the US and Washington believes that they will lose their technology supremacy. It's very clear, it's written in there. While the Chinese plan is much more about collaboration and cooperation with as many people, as many countries, as many smart people around the world in order to together basically build AI for good and basically build a global AI system. And this is something we don't always recognize or value. And this is the very different direction as the US is. And so if I would summarize the US versus China in terms of AI race, then I can say very simply that China is democratizing AI. And I love using China and democracy in the same sentence. It always is very funny to do, but ultimately this is the reality. China and India as well are democratizing AI, while the US is really monopolizing AI. And what that means is that they want to have their model put or imposed on the rest of the world, where China is augmenting society, augmenting the industry, augmenting humanity with AI by democratizing it. And this is a very different way of looking at AI in itself. Two different paths, and so there is no race. Now, China and Europe have a very different view on regulation, although it's as strict one as the other. In China, they see the code as the law. What that means is that AI and the way that AI is being built and and being created has to be in the code, they have to, or in the molds, they have to embed that regulation. And so this is because they want to be able to deploy at scale. Well, in Europe, the law is the code. That's the code of conduct. That means they want to build trust at scale. And so one wants to deploy at scale, the other one wants to trust at scale. But they both have a very strict regulation. It's just one has to, in China, you have to embed it. You have to basically look at the model itself, and you have to ask yourself a different question. And that question is, how dangerous is AI? Well, in Europe, the question that we're asking ourselves is, who is responsible for the dangers that come out of AI? And so there's different risk levels in Europe where we protect basically humanity and consumers and industry. We want to protect a lot. And we're looking primarily in Europe at the providers, meaning these creators and the suppliers like the social media and the big model companies. And this is really a legal matter. While in China, it's very different. They're asking the question, how dangerous is AI? This is an engineering mindset. It's not about responsibility. It's about engineering. It's binary. Either it's dangerous or it's not dangerous. And so this is a lot about accountability. What that means is that they're looking for all the creators of, and this is about all the AI content and all the actors, so not just the creators and the suppliers, or the providers, but also the consumers, and everybody has to chip in and make sure they're accountable by how they use AI. Of course, this is a typical for a Chinese model of controlling basically everything that happens in the internet world. It's the same model in AI. And so this is more a technical matter. And so the Chinese are approaching the law from a technical perspective, while we in Europe are looking at it much more as a legal perspective with regulations that has been used as the code. Now, if you want to summarize between China and Europe, it's very clear. I mean, China's been extremely good at speed. If you look at how fast they've developed an AI society, or at least caught up with the US in terms of AI, and this at scale by building these huge ecosystems, meaning really implementing it into the industries and transforming the industries, I mean, it's really hard for Europe to beat. But what we've always been good at in Europe, extremely good, is our creativity. It's about our quality and also about the efficiency. And we've been very good at it in the past, and this is what China, specifically when it comes to Germany and all these countries, have been looking at Europe as an example. The problem is now today with artificial intelligence that we in Europe are losing a lot of what we're really good at, creativity, quality, and efficiency, to AI. AI is taking the jobs of the things that we were good at. And the Chinese are actually gaining something that they weren't always good at in the past. Now they're better at it with the young generation, but still they're getting something on surplus and we're losing something in itself. And so we have to be very cautious and be aware of where we stand in Europe today and how we look at our own future. And so I believe the thing that we're usually doing wrong in Europe today is to look at China as this big iceberg coming towards us, the AI iceberg, a big danger that will hit our shores, where basically we need to protect everything, believe everything's unfair coming out of China. We shouldn't trust it. We should confront China when it comes to certain things, when it's built on AI, and basically really challenge them on data and be very rigid and mainly looking at the differences. And if you look at the race between China and the US, the reality is that China and Europe are much closer to each other when it comes to regulation and the implementation and how they see their AI society in the future. So we should work together with China because they're not that iceberg that we see. We should look below the waterline. And below the waterline, we should exactly do what China has done over the past 10 years since Xi Jinping really said we want to become the innovation leader in the world, and now apply this to AI. We should make very clear choices, not try to do everything, be very responsive, just like water, go around the iceberg, be very adaptive to that new world, and not only look at the US, also look at China, because there's a lot of things happening specifically in the industry. We should look much more futuristic and flow forward, meaning that we look at the future and not try to protect the past, and be very transformational. And so I believe if we in Europe act more as water and less as being afraid of the iceberg hitting our shores, we will understand the value that Chinese AI has, as opposed to what's happening in the US. And I write very clearly in my book that Europe has to make a choice. Are we going to continue taking blue pills, meaning that we believe that our comfort zone that we've had for many, many decades will continue, and we don't really need to look at anybody else, and we just need to de-risk from China and now also from the US? That is probably not going to be the right strategy, because we're going to not be facing the reality where China and the US are completely changing the paradigm, completely changing the future, and AI is at the center of it. And I believe Europe has to make painful choices and really clearly look at how their own future will look like, and use AI as something that can actually create that future and not be something that destroys their own past. And if we're not going to do that and not taking enough red pills, my worry is that the matrix, both the American matrix or the Chinese matrix, one of the two, is going to rewrite us.
Alrighty. Yes, my mic is on. Great. Hello, everybody. How's the energy in the room? I know it's Friday. I know it's day 5 of this week, but how we doing? Great. Good. Okay, great. It was really nice to hear that intervention from Pascal on China, and that gives us a lot of food for thought moving on. So what we're going to do next is we're going to have a 6 to 7 minute intervention from everyone in the panel. We have some people in person, we have some people online, and I'm going to take some time to introduce each just before they speak, and then after that we'll go into a discussion, and we're ever so slightly ahead of schedule, which means that there'll be time for questions at the end. So please also be thinking of things you want to ask at the end. This is also for people online. So yeah, let's get into it. So first, online, as Muriel mentioned, we have joining us from San Francisco, and you said it was 1 a.m., but I checked, it's actually 2:30 a.m. Is that right, Gregory? Right, so...
Absolutely.
So
absolutely, you are
this
right.
is dedication of a very, very high standard. So we're all very, very grateful for Gregory being here. Gregory Renard is a Belgian-born AI architect and entrepreneur based in San Francisco. In 2012, he created Angie, one of Europe's first large-scale conversational assistants, and has since advised governments and global companies on AI strategy and governance. He's a co-author of the Holberton-Turing Oath, which is an ethical commitment for AI engineers. And also he's the co-founder of Everyone.ai, a non-profit focused on responsible AI and child protection. So thanks so much for being here, Gregory. Thanks for staying up so late, and please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation of Pascal about China, and it's really resonate here about what I'm living daily on the ground. So I would like to go through 5 points about where first we are on the Silicon Valley today. It's definitely here. I like to say that we are not in US and maybe not in California. We are really in the Bay Area. Silicon Valley is completely another place. Okay, we are on the territory of US, but it's another game. It's about speed, it's about pressure, and certainly about ambiguity. So what strikes today is really the extreme acceleration, as you saw, and I believe you are reading daily about new stuff. You saw a few weeks ago about OpenClaw. AI is no longer a topic. It's becoming clearly an infrastructure of everything. We will have this technology for everything, like we've got today electricity and computer. If we don't have electricity and computer, we cannot do what we are doing now together. And we are moving from the experimentation to the execution. Companies are rebuilding themselves now around AI here. It's completely a switch, a change about how you are organizing yourself, how you are working daily, how you are dealing with almost the world around you. It's nothing that you had on top. It's really something becoming really core in your daily life, with 3 simultaneous forces. The first one with the paradigm, when I'm speaking about ambiguity, you've got on the side a massive capital inflow, and that's becoming sometimes really strict about that because I attract more than half of ventures capital today, and they believe at the time ROI, and that's coming very quickly. The second point is really about extreme competition and intensity. Here, it's moving fast, super fast. I like to say that you've got a car, and a new car is 5 years. You've got a model, and a new model can be a week. And it's moving super fast. And that's also why I'm here, because I love this kind of speed. It's really speed that dominates everything here. The third one about this point is about growing pressure and profitability, as we just discussed. There is also a paradox. On one side, we've got the very liberal mindset, and you started saying, and I heard in the first presentation about Elon Musk and others that are super liberal mindset. And on the other side, we've got on the ground a deep uncertainty, a lot of discussion about, okay, are we doing good? Because at the end of the day, we are engineers and we want to have a positive impact on the world. And the goal is not to, I don't see any engineers waking up in the morning and said, okay, I will dominate the world now. The second point is about hype and discipline. What I start to hear more and more here in the Barra discussing with VCs and in many with investors is about the reset dynamic that is arriving. We are entering in a new transition phase of AI. After the phase of hype and massive investment, there is now a growing expectation about discipline and outcome. So it's time now to produce something, not only about hype. And so it's like impossible today to raise money just on slide. Okay, there is still some people thinking about the next generation of AI, like one of my friends, Jan Leuken, doing an amazing job and vision about role models that I completely support, and I think it's definitely the next step. But on the ground, with applied AI, and that was also part of the discussion, and where China is moving so fast, is the integration of AI in everything on the daily life. And one of the elements that I'm seeing now, I had the opportunity and the chance to manage big teams in AI, between 50 to 100 engineers and PhDs. But now my teams are definitely fewer people. And because one of the jokes a few days ago, I needed to do very hard tasks, very long, that 2 years ago, I needed maybe a team of 10 people for a few months. I started a hierarchical agent architecture. So think about an organization of agentic agent, and we were able to do the job in less than 8 hours. Me and the machine. Completely crazy. It's changing everything. We are moving to more automation, higher expectation of impact directly. And I think this is key for Europe, because it means that the game is no longer about innovation, but about operability at scale and adoption. We need to be super careful, and if you are going on my LinkedIn profile, you will see my last post was about resistance. How people are freezed about adoption of technology like artificial intelligence. It's super important that you can adapt very quickly in your life process and start transforming your company directly. Because on the third point I would like to address today, it's about we are moving. I believe you all heard about vibe coding. So vibe coding, you've got people coding directly. That's exactly what I explained you when I started a team of 30 agents doing the job with me. And I'm doing that daily. To be honest with you, it's at minimum a team of 6 and can go to 30, 40 agents that can work with me. And as I like to say, it's super easy because they are doing the job, no discussion, no ego, boom, straight, going directly to the point. But you are moving from vibe coding to vibe working. And that point is super important. And everyone needs to understand that because people are not ready for that. Organizations orchestrating AI agents as part of their workforce. AI is becoming more than just a tool or a technology. It's becoming a digital coworker, not a tool at the end of the day. We will use that daily in whole life, and it will change everything. You will find on my website, I wrote 2 years ago an essay because, to be confident with you, I went to burnout because it was too much. It was completely overwhelming for me. You know, I needed 2 years to create a technology, and I was able to do it, the same technology, over a weekend. Think about what's the purpose of my life? Why I'm working? I'm not only working to make money. I'm working also to have a purpose and goal on where I'm going and what I'm doing daily. So it's super important for governments to understand that, because in Silicon Valley today, startups reach massive output with very small teams. You saw OpenClaw, one guy, 1 billion. So valuation that are completely crazy. Agents are assigned task, budget, and responsibility. There is no limit. Today, we think that it's still for a few people, but you will see very quickly that everyone, if you can explain how to do a task to someone else, you will be able to do to the machine. And the machine will do it at a level of accuracy more than 98% of quality. Night and day, 7 days per week. So that point is pushing the boundary between human and machine work at a high level. This change everything about governance. Think about how our nations are organized around IRS and taxes and everything, and how we are financing. But think about, if we don't have this kind of work, how we will sustain our nations. It's about governance, about accountability, and about productivity models. And this is where Europe, again, had a rare opportunity, because the question is no longer only technological. It's organizational, societal, and political. And it's super important. You know, we are coming with very strong roots and values, and it's super important to bring that on the table, because Europe will not win, exactly as Pascal said, will not win by copying China or Silicon Valley. Europe can lead in something else: operability, trust. For me, 26, 28, only one word: trust. How you trust this kind of stuff? Alignment also with human values, super important. And we've got a big game on that point too.
Thanks.
It's really how we will deploy AI, how we will integrate the society, and how we respect people.
Thanks a lot, Gregory. Thanks a lot for that. Let's give a round of applause for that intervention. I think, yeah, you mentioned, you know, you're thinking about the future of your career moving forward. I think a lot of young people in the room are listening to that very, very nervously. So yeah, maybe that's something we can touch on later as well. Okay, so thanks a lot, Gregory. Moving on to Juha Heikkilä. Juha is a senior AI policy expert at the European Commission's DG Connect, where he focuses on international EU AI policy and global governance cooperation. He previously led the Commission's Robotics and AI unit, driving key initiatives including the EU AI strategy, the Coordinated Plan on AI, and the White Paper on AI. So thanks very much for being, Juha, here. I understand you came from Luxembourg in the morning, so thanks a lot for that as well. And take it away.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to join this panel and join this event and give the Commission perspective on this. So let me first, so I will not directly comment on what has been said before, but let me just sort of outline where we stand and what we do and why we do it. So first of all, together with the member states, the European Commission published the International Digital Strategy just in June. And basically, it has three main objectives: to boost the EU technological competitiveness through economic and business cooperation, to promote the high level of security for the European Union and its partners, and to shape the global digital governance and standards within the network of partners. And we want to deepen, broaden, and connect the existing relationships that we have. In that regard, we also take this forward in the area of AI. In fact, we had been doing this in the area of AI already well before that strategy was published in June. And I would like to, first of all, and I think Pascal's speech may give you the impression that we only do regulation. If you thought the EU only does regulation, think again, because that's not at all the case. We start from the assumption that AI has very significant big benefits, but it carries some risks, and we want to strike the right balance between innovation and protection. Therefore, we work on three pillars: excellence, trust, and international engagement. Excellence means basically significant investment in and support to research, innovation, capacity building, deployment, and adoption. Trust means appropriate guardrails on AI, and it's no secret to anyone in the room that we have published the AI Act, the regulation on AI, because we think that AI has a number of special characteristics which require then a more targeted piece of legislation. Those characteristics include complexity, opacity, autonomy, use of data, etc., which can lead to risks to safety, health, and fundamental rights, but also legal uncertainty and enforcement questions, distrust even, and of course fragmentation of the legal landscape. But not only of the legal landscape, because we have a single market, so that would have been fragmented as well. And then the international engagement. So basically what we do is a comprehensive approach where everything hangs together. And we have recently published policy papers in this regard, the AI Content Action Plan in the spring of last year. And we are building up our AI factories. So these are ecosystems centered around our supercomputing facilities, so they will be upgraded and further adapted to make it possible for the training of models, but we will also be facilitating access to them. And we are stepping this up by building even more powerful supercomputers, the AI, so-called AI gigafactories. We are boosting adoption. The Apply AI strategy in the autumn emphasized this. So we are enhancing the competitiveness of our strategic sectors by boosting adoption in these, and also our technological sovereignty. This is very important, and we feel that we have to do it. So we strengthen all the three pillars. And I think Gregory said something very important, which is kind of the sort of key aspect of our third way, as Muriel said at the beginning rightly. So basically we want trust, because trust is a sine qua non, a necessary condition for the take-up of AI. And the take-up of AI, of course, adoption, is the necessary condition for the benefits to materialize. So we see in our international activity AI as a strategic global technology which requires action, and we position ourselves as a proactive, cooperative, and a reliable partner. And we want to lead by example and collaborate internationally where necessary and useful. But we want to, in this regard, also protect our interests, security, and values. This is very important to us. So these are the elements of our third way. And we will be further expanding our bilateral network, but also we are actively involved in all the relevant international forums to pursue AI governance aspects and questions related to this, because we want to have a voice in this, and we are a voice that is listened to because we are an early mover in this space. So our AI regulation has actually attracted a lot of attention, and many, many countries around the world are very interested in what we are doing. And this has been a major component of the narrative. And of course, this has then been taken to a caricature level by the media, because now it's all about just regulation in the EU, but of course it's much more than that. So this kind of polarized picture of the EU regulating and protecting others, going ahead with innovation, the picture is much more nuanced, but I can come back to that later. I would like to also emphasize the fact that we want to build on our strategic assets and strengths, talent, research, industrial strength, very sophisticated industrial sectors, and the large single market with uniform rules. And this is important to understand. If we didn't have the AI Act, we would have potentially 27 different legal regimes on AI. Compare this to the United States. It's not a completely regulation-free zone for AI. Individual states have regulated. Of course, the president and the administration currently realize this and try to change this by force, but fail to do so because they realize that there is a patchwork of legislation emerging. And of course, as was stated by Pascal, China has a fair bit of regulation, and that is very different in many ways from the perspective of its goals and its spirit, but it is a highly regulated environment. So let me just make maybe one comment to wrap up to what Pascal said. I think it's important to understand that there are no free lunches. So I think that the picture of China that was presented was, in my mind, actually, to my mind, too rosy. We see this in many international forums in the context of the United Nations. So China cooperation, maybe yes, but it comes at a price. And that price then is to be paid later from what we see. So China uses the UN context and the support of the developing countries, the cooperation aspect, quite aggressively then to push their goals and their values against like-minded countries. So just to put this on the table, I think the picture is much more complex than what this was suggested. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Juha. Thanks a lot, Juha. Really, really appreciate the intervention. I think one thing that stood out to me there, really, as someone working on AI policy in the EU and around the world, the EU has the AI Act, and if you try and keep track of the Senate bills popping up in the US, you will pull your hair out. The US is going down a potentially more fragmented regulatory approach than the EU, and this is not really talked about much. So that's a great point to raise. Okay, now moving on to online, we have Imogen Shon, who is a UK government official serving as Deputy Director for AI Strategy at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, also known as DCIT. She shapes the government's approach to AI governance and strategic AI development, and having previously held policy roles at the Home Office. So thanks a lot, Imogen, for joining online and for bringing the UK perspective. Take it away.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. So in terms of how the UK views this question, AI is moving faster than many of the systems we built to govern technology in the past. And that pace is pushing all of us to think more clearly about digital sovereignty, what it really means in practice, and how the UK, the EU, and our partners can continue to exercise meaningful influence in an AI-driven world. For the UK, the ambition is clear. We want Britain to achieve the fastest rate of AI adoption in the G7, because the productivity dividend from AI is how our leading sectors will stay ahead, and how small, medium, and large businesses alike will grow, innovate, and create new opportunities. And internationally, there's real opportunity for the UK and the EU to work more closely together. Our Chancellor set this out plainly in her May's lecture on Tuesday, stressing that there is also a strategic imperative for deeper integration between the EU and the UK in our shared need for greater economic resilience. AI is one of the areas where that shared strategic imperative is most obvious, in building secure supply chains, ensuring access to compute, and shaping global norms that reflect our democratic values. So in terms of digital sovereignty, Britain's future prosperity won't be built in isolation, but through partnerships with those who share our interests, our values, and our ambitions. Few partnerships are as relevant as the one we have with our European neighbours, and close working together is the right course for Britain and for the EU. From the UK's perspective, sovereignty in the age of AI isn't an abstract concept, it's practical. So as our Chancellor said, it's about having kind of a sovereign edge, not a sovereign wall. So we want to continue to have access to the best frontier tech wherever that is in the world. It's also about having access to the core building blocks of AI, the compute, the data, the skills, the infrastructure, and having choice, so we're not dependent on a single supplier, country, or platform. It's about having the capability to deploy and adapt AI in ways that reflect our values and serve our citizens. But sovereignty, as I said, doesn't mean self-sufficiency at all costs, and it doesn't mean standing alone. We think that fragmentation would weaken all of us when scale, interoperability, and shared standards most matter. And that's why the UK's approach is rooted in openness and partnership, ensuring that our systems work together, our markets stay connected, so that we have access to the best frontier models and our rules are compatible. So rather than viewing Europe's positioning on AI through the lens of what others are doing, I think it's useful to focus on what Europe, and including the UK, can actively shape together. Europe has real strengths, world-leading institutions and research institutions, strong public sectors, deep industrial capability, and a long tradition of setting standards that travel globally. The question now is how we convert those strengths into sustained influence in an AI-driven world. For the UK, that starts with working closely with our partners, including our European partners, and on capability. That means shared approaches to AI infrastructure, cooperation on compute and data, and stronger alignment between research, innovation, and deployment. It means recognizing that Europe's influence doesn't come from scale alone, but from credibility. So like when we understand how to collaborate together on AI security, on assurance, on interoperability, it shapes global expectations. And we've seen that already in areas like data protection, digital markets, and online safety. The opportunity now is to extend that leadership into AI through practical systems that enable safe, trusted deployment at scale. The EU and the UK have a real opportunity to shape how AI is governed globally, and that influence won't come just from legislation, but from our institutions and capabilities. The UK has tried to lead by focusing on that substance, so working together with colleagues in the EU Commission, the EU member states, and observers ranging from Mexico to Japan, and of course the US, we played a key role in securing the world's first binding international agreement on AI through the Council of Europe. We established the AI Security Institute to deepen the global scientific understanding of frontier risks, and are working through the International Network for Advanced AI Measurement, Evaluation, and Science. And we are investing in third-party AI assurance, helping to turn trust into a competitive strength and not a constraint. But norm setting only works if it's shared, and on safety standards, assurance, supply chains, and security, coalition building is essential. And that's why we're working closely through standards development organizations such as ETSI and multilateral fora, including the G7, OECD, GPAY, and the UN, and strengthening cooperation with European and other international partners. If we look ahead to kind of practical things, what can be done in the next 12 months? We think three things matter most. So first, we think infrastructure is really important, because sovereignty requires compute and compute access. So for us, that's about ensuring UK talent has access to world-class compute, strengthening our leadership in AI, and unlocking the next wave of scientific discovery. Governments need to ensure access to both public and private AI infrastructure aligned with energy, sustainability, and regional growth. And in the UK, we're investing very heavily in our public compute through our AI research resource, and enabling private investment through AI growth zones to ensure that we have sufficient capability and capacity to support domestic innovation and adoption. Then second, we are working on regulatory innovation. So we need regulation that enables safe deployment, but not delay. And for us, that means creating spaces to test, learn, and adapt. So in the UK, tools like regulatory sandboxes and our proposed AI growth lab are designed to help move faster from pilots to real-world impact while maintaining public trust. And third, people and skills. So talent is the real strategic asset. And that's why the UK is investing across our talent pipeline, from foundational AI skills for 10 million workers to advanced fellowships and global talent attraction. Our firm belief is if we want sovereignty and influence, we have to invest in people. Turning partnerships into co-creation. So if we're serious about sovereignty and influence, international partnerships have to go beyond downstream adoption. We want to explore how the UK and EU can collaborate further. So for instance, on infrastructure, we're already working together. And in May 2024, the UK joined Euro HPC, which opened the door to our researchers to work together in cutting-edge European work on supercomputing. Since then, we've committed £7.8 million to deepen UK involvement in Euro HPC, which was a really important strand of our AI Opportunities Action Plan and our compute roadmap. That includes £2.5 million to establish a new AI factory antenna based at the UK's first national supercomputing centre at the University of Edinburgh. And building on this means co-investing in infrastructure, shaping standards together, and building shared assurance and evaluation capability. It means creating real capabilities for talent and ideas to move while anchoring economic value at home. And our new Sovereign AI unit reflects that mindset, where we're backing strategically important AI companies with an integrated offer of capital, compute, procurement, and hands-on support, so innovation can scale responsibly and deliver long-term value. So let me finish with this. What matters now is strategic collaboration grounded in shared capability, shared values, and a shared sense of purpose. The UK wants to be a trusted partner, serious about building, serious about safety, and committed to working with Europe and others to shape the global future of AI. If we get all of this right, AI can strengthen all our economies, deepen our society's resilience, and amplify our collective influence. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you a lot, Imogen. Round of applause for that intervention as well. Thanks. Yeah, great to hear about the collaboration happening between the UK and the EU, especially at this time. So moving on to Sarah Rentoff-Smith. Sarah heads the division on AI and emerging digital technologies at the OECD, overseeing AI governance work and the OECD AI Policy Observatory, the Global Partnership on AI, and the Global Forum on Emerging Technologies. Before the OECD, she served as Chief Policy Advisor on Technology, Peace and Security at Denmark's UN mission. So thanks a lot for being here, Sarah, from Paris, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, and thank you also for the warm invitation. Oops, I'm just gonna, these slides are in a different place than where we started. There we go. Yeah, thank you to the organizers for the invitation. Thanks for the excellent moderation. As mentioned, I have the privilege of leading the work on AI and emerging digital technologies at the OECD, and I think it's very timely for us to be here. A lot of conversation around partnerships, international AI governance, and some of the research topics that we're also looking at, such as compute and investment. So I'll share how we contribute to AI governance across 3 dimensions listed here. Shared principles. We do a lot of work to define aspects of AI. Most recently, we looked at agentic AI and how we should understand that. We've defined AI incidents in a manner that, again, can allow different frameworks to be more interoperable. And there's, of course, also the OECD AI principles, which I'll get back to. The second dimension of this is the evidence base. As I mentioned, we have a global observatory on our website, oecd.ai, which I invite you to visit, where you'll see real-time data related to all these conversations we're having here that you can access. And also, we have a repository of interesting tools to see a bit what different settings, different countries are developing here. And then finally, partnerships. At the OECD, we serve as a platform for intergovernmental discussions and policy development in the forum called GPAI, the Global Partnership on AI, which was integrated into the OECD in 2024. And we currently have 46 members, counting members across 6 continents, so really a full global dynamic there. So in terms of the OECD AI principles, as I mentioned already, we were early contributors to this conversation about AI governance, and we've seen strong adherence to these. So to be a member of GPAI, you have to adhere to the principles. So that means that these 46 members actually adhere to the OECD AI principles, which are 5 values-based principles, so trustworthy, human-centric AI. And part of that, those principles was also a definition of the AI system, which has been embedded since in the EU AI Act and also in the Council of Europe Convention on AI. So really seeing how this gets picked up into multilateral frameworks. And similarly, the G7 and G20 principles also draw from the OECD principles. If I move on to the evidence base, we've talked about today already the infrastructure aspects and the compute. So drawing from the principles, we published actually in 2023 a blueprint for building national AI compute strategies. We found, and we have also on our website, a global repository of AI strategies and policies, so you can see what countries have adopted so far. But what we found was that for compute, this was not explicitly addressed. So we created this blueprint for building national AI compute strategies. What we're seeing actually is that a number of countries in recent years are beginning to look at this in more detail. You can make your own conclusions as to why that's being a priority. We also have recent research on just access to compute, and you would not be surprised to see that here the US and China are really leading in that access. And so emerging and developing economies have much less access. They have access to 23% of this capacity, and most of it does not enable actually AI. So sort of a true concentration here, geographically speaking. If we look at VC investment, which was also already brought up, we have data in 2025 on VC investment globally, and we found that 61% of this is going into AI-related businesses, so really a super concentration of capital, as was already mentioned. And again, here, the geographical picture is unsurprising. 75% goes into US-based companies. So that's really where that investment is centralized. But I will mention part of the picture is also that the EU is a net beneficiary of VC investment, meaning that European-based companies receive more capital than is supplied by VC firms in Europe. So something to note there, perhaps, in terms of deployment. Maybe not to go into too much detail, but if you look at the picture of where investments are going, we've also produced research on this, looking at the EU specifically from 2015 to 2023, and this is broader investment, not just VC investment. But here we're seeing also this trend that really conveys that there's a shift towards infrastructure and deployment in terms of the categories that are being prioritized for investment. The third dimension, which is really important, and I hope we can get into more, as I mentioned, was global partnerships. And there was this important integration, as I mentioned, in 2024, where GPay became a part of the OECD. So I should mention I've joined the OECD myself 8 weeks ago, coming from the UN background, actually. So I thought I would have much less friends being at the OECD, 38 members. But there are a lot of engagement way beyond those 38 members. So one is this forum of the 46 countries that I mentioned. And again, we're seeing a gradual expansion there. I was at the India AI Impact Summit, also, I think, maybe almost a second week in the office. But there we already had 2 new members join. So Malta and Saudi Arabia are the most recent members to join, and we're seeing continuous interest. So actually, to join, you have to adhere to the global AI or the OECD AI principles, and we have 2 more adherents, as it's called. So Ukraine and Egypt also adhering, and that means they're sort of on a path to potentially also join. So really seeing an expansion of that. And we have other ways to work also with a broader set of countries that I mentioned. We can maybe get into that. And I think maybe also importantly, multi-stakeholder approaches was mentioned by Muriel in the beginning. The power of that forum is really also, we have these strong expert networks with over 600 experts that we connect to so that the policy needs of countries and governments can sort of be addressed through this expertise, and that's how we produce a lot of our evidence and our policy research. Then finally, as part of the multi-stakeholder engagement, the partnerships that we have, we've worked with the G7 to translate the G7 International Code of Conduct into a reporting framework for organizations working on frontier AI. And we've been very successful in generating interest here and have had 25 organizations actually report on their risk management practices. And drawing from that, we're sort of drawing early lessons, and we're seeing in that there's an interest from these companies to be more transparent. You can see the reports on our website, and also that they find value for themselves in this. So they've seen a sort of strengthening of internal governance, of coordination, but also I spoke to a couple of our partners again in Delhi, and this was very much what they conveyed to me was part of their conversations with clients and investors. So sort of something that they found to be useful. So yeah, maybe just to conclude here, I know we have a lot of conversations to have and more interventions as well, but happy to go into more detail in the question round.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Yes, we're back on. Thanks a lot, Sarah, for that. Okay, moving on to Risto Uk. So on my left here, Risto Uk is Head of European Policy and Research at the Future of Life Institute in Brussels, where he contributed to the inclusion of general-purpose AI and systemic risk provisions in the EU AI Act. He is also a PhD researcher at KU Leuven, focusing on systemic risk assessment for general-purpose AI, previously a visiting researcher at Stanford's Digital Economy Lab, and currently a visiting researcher at the London School of Economics. That's all right, right? Yes, okay. Great, so thanks a lot for being here, Risto. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. Hello, good morning. This is really a fascinating conversation. I look forward to having the discussion later. So I wanted to start my remarks with, indeed, the Stanford research visit. I undertook it last year in the spring, and my goal there was to meet with a lot of people, understand what kind of impact AI is having already on the economy, what kind of impact it could have in the future. And one of the conversations I had with a lot of people was asking them what they think about European AI governance, what do they think about what's happening in the US, what is happening worldwide. And surprisingly to me, in one of my conversations with an American professor there, I realized that he understood AI, innovation, governance much better than many of my European colleagues or European fellows understand. So I wanted to quote him today. This is from a conversation I had with him. There's an inferiority complex in the EU, and the AI Act is an easy target, even though it can't be the reason for the lag in AI innovation. A law that was passed just a year ago. There are many other reasons. In addition, there are racing dynamics in the US that influence companies to build technology with few guardrails. The EU is providing a global public good through regulation, which incentivizes the US companies to improve their practices. The US hasn't got their shit together to develop its own regulation. Additionally, there's no evidence that the AI Act is slowing US innovation down at all. There's still plenty of it. So yeah, I was quite surprised that, in my view, an American professor made a lot more sense in the EU. I oftentimes hear the EU AI Act is the reason, or another Digital Markets Act, or whatever other is the reason for AI innovation lag. It was also said earlier, I think in the opening talk or the second talk, that there's a lot of mistrust in AI, especially in Europe and US compared to Asia. And indeed, I've seen recent research, for example, from Pew Research Center, that in the US, for example, over 50% of the population is more afraid of AI than excited about it. And that doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. And I've seen these similar types of takes in Europe. And considering that we do want to develop AI, but we don't want random, fancy, addictive technologies or tools. We want actual, meaningful innovation, and safeguards are part of that. Safeguards indeed have to be there. So because of that reason, we are noticing that actually, internationally, there are a lot of regions coming out with their regulations or very seriously considering it right now. And it's indeed not accurate anymore to say that the EU is the only actor regulating AI. That might have been the case if you go back a little bit, thinking about the AI Act's development and drafting, but that's not the case anymore. There are AI laws in China, South Korea, Vietnam, several US states, including California, a very important place where a lot of AI development is happening. There are other countries with active AI regulatory initiatives like Canada, Japan, Singapore, Australia, UK, Brazil, many, many others. So we should use this momentum. We should build upon this emerging convergence and ensure that strong guardrails and market access requirements are implemented. And together, all of these partners can be very strong and continue taking serious action. I think this is a very reasonable approach to take because without access to these important markets, including the EU's one, but other ones as well, AI corporations cannot be profitable. It's very expensive to develop AI systems. For example, OpenAI has, I think, 1.5 trillion worth of investments and contracts, but my understanding is they're making like 20 billion revenue or something. So one asks, how can they overcome this huge gap? Well, they need access to the EU market. The EU market is one of the biggest markets for ChatGPT. Other markets are also very important. So whatever the EU says, whatever the EU asks, companies, it matters to them to comply with these requirements and these asks. And if other countries are also part of it, that's even larger. The market size is even bigger and it's even stronger as a voice. So we have a lot of important asks and we can make things change. One other thing I wanted to mention is the EU AI Act is already having a process effect. It's a very strong one, but arguably it will be even stronger if the EU properly enforces it, starting from this August, when many of the rules enter into force. But it would be even stronger for the whole world globally if there wasn't just the Brussels effect, but there was Brussels plus Brasilia plus Pretoria plus Hanoi plus all kinds of other cities effect. Much larger market size, more influence on the behavior of corporations in the US, China, everywhere. Speaking of this larger coalition of like-minded partners, regulators, the EU wouldn't second guess its regulations, its governance approach if other partners collaborated more and if the EU pursued these collaborations more. I think Juha mentioned this important international digital strategy. That is a very good start, very good basis for this, but more can be done to build upon this. So what should the EU do? So I think, first of all, the EU should start by ensuring strong EU Act enforcement, including general purpose AI, which the rules enter into force this August. Ensure that these rules are very clear, the market functions. That's, I think, the first start. Secondly, more actively support partners across the world who are trying to pass their own AI legislation. They're looking up to the EU. They're trying to get advice. And it is very much in the EU's interest to more actively do that, to make sure that other regions follow similar type of approach to the EU Act. Because if they do that, then arguably it is very much in the interest of the EU, because then there's a big market that produces AI according to your values and your perspectives. You have a big market to take advantage of, to benefit from. And others have also other markets that similarly function well according to clear rules. So yeah, I think we should take advantage of this emerging momentum with some coalescing around the EU's model. And yeah, let's build upon this.
Great. Thanks a lot, Risto. Let's also give a round of applause for that intervention. I've managed to drop my notes. Great. Okay, so we've been hearing so much about EU innovation, but we haven't heard from the EU innovators themselves. We've heard from San Francisco, we've heard from the Commission, we've heard from UK, OECD, and also civil society. So now I want to introduce Ferdinand Castier, is a senior business group leader, digital at Agoria, the Belgian Technology Industry Federation, where he represents tech companies and supports their digital data and AI strategies. He's actively involved in Belgian and European AI initiatives, including Digital Wallonia for AI, and co-leading the AI for Belgium working group on AI for industry. So this is a perspective that we're really interested in hearing. Okay. So take it away, Ferdinand.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, for this kind introduction. Thank you very much, Nathanael, also for your invitation for this panel. I would like to come back and I would like to highlight two topics in my intervention here. The first one is based on what Muriel said in her introduction on strategic interdependency. And then my second point will be more on physical AI. So first, about strategic interdependency. So we had a great presentation of Pascal on China, and I agree that it's a little bit too rose. Because China published also this week their 15th five-year plan, at least the outlines. So I found the text on the internet. It's all in Chinese, so luckily Google Translate made a Chinese text, an English text of it. And I put it in a Word document, and it's a document of about 100 pages. And in that document of 100 pages, you have AI mentioned at least 22 times, meaning that is crucial for them. But even more, they have one clear, unambiguous objective with this 5-year plan, and that's full technological self-reliance. So it's good to speak about cooperation, but it's clearly set in their 5-year plan. It's a full technological self-reliance, inclusive for the semiconductor independency. So it's the full stack. So China is building. They don't ask permission for it. They don't consult, I don't know how many committees for that. They just do it. They are builders. Xi Jinping is an engineer. I think the 15 guys around Xi Jinping are all engineers. So they are builders. And meanwhile, we in Europe, we are still debating on what digital sovereignty actually means. So we have to act, I think. And that's why also I think what Gregory said, we need to shift from innovation to operability is a good one, because we really need to go to action. Good. To settle the debate also a little bit, I still hear a lot of people in Europe saying we need to build a full, complete, isolated European AI stack. I still hear this. I mean, I think really this is the wrong question. Like mentioned in the introduction, the right question should be which nodes of the AI value chain must we own? Which nodes of this value chain must we build together with trusted partners? And then which nodes of this value chain can we safely source from allies? So you have 3 different levels. It's not black or white. Okay, which nodes must we own? Okay, we can debate on that, but I think the data part, of course, this is something that we have to own. And okay, maybe some European LLMs to safeguard our democracy, because we all know that otherwise manipulation of elections and these kind of things, if you don't own the model, could be more easy. So some parts of this value chain we have to own. And not only for LLMs, and that's for my second part, I will come back later to that, also for the world models, I mean for the models that we will use in physical AI. This is also something that we have to own. The second level was the nodes in the value chain where we must build together with trusted partners. And I can only refer to the brilliant speech of Mark Carney at Davos. I guess you all remember this one. So the Prime Minister of Canada, he said middle powers must act together. If you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And he said also specifically for AI, we are cooperating with like-minded democracies to ensure we will not ultimately be forced to choose between hegemons or hyperscalers. That's a great sentence. I mean, it should be printed on the walls of every ministry and EU institution here in Brussels, I think. So we have to work together exactly with the UK, with India, with Brazil, with even with Taiwan. I think Taiwan is a quite important partner also in this value chain. About the last level, safely sourced from allies. Of course, the US is an ally, and China also could be an ally also and should be an ally. But we don't have to be naive, of course. I mean, strategic interdependency is not naivety. If we buy from Shenzhen or from the Silicon Valley, we have also to learn from them. They are ahead in their expertise compared to us. You have to say this. So let's behave like the Chinese did with us during years. Yes, we can work together, but we have to learn on how they do it and how they manage to go that far. That's quite important. So that was my first part, that we don't have to be passengers but architects of the system. If I have 2 minutes more, or
maybe 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. On physical AI, just maybe because I really think that the LLM story and the gigafactories is a bit over-indexed in the debate. I'm not saying it's not necessary, it's necessary for sure, but it's over-indexed as we forget a little bit the debate on the smaller models, the world models, that will be embedded in all the physical devices. And that's a playground that is still open today. It's not yet fully defined. So it's now, today, that we have focus on that we can shape that playground. Because this will make that we will have a secure physical world around us within 5 years. And that window is now open, but in 5 years it will be closed. So that's an important debate, because it's not only for the humanoids, because when we speak about physical AI, a lot of people think about humanoids, but it's also about industrial machines, it's about normal robots, it's about infrastructure, our ports, our energy grids. I mean, the real world around us. I mean, if this is fully driven by non-EU models, then we will have a big security problem. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Ferdinand. Let's give a round of applause for that. Okay. So now, how this is going to go? Basically, I have some questions to ask each panelist, but I want to encourage you. You know, even if the question is not addressed to you, but you really think you have something to say, please, like, give me a nod or something, and then you can come in. This is also to the people online. Maybe just cut in. This would be even better if you're disagreeing with the person who's answering the question, because of course on this panel we don't always just want to agree with each other. I think some interesting perspectives have been shared, but ones in which there are different perspectives is probably quite interesting for the audience, I would guess. Okay, so the first question, Gregory, are you still with us? I know it's 3:30 a.m. where you are, but are you still with us? Yes, he is. Great. Okay, so actually, just a quick poll for the audience. Thanks for bearing with us through the interventions. So I just want to hear from the audience really quick with a show of hands. Do you think right now there are more tech workers leaving the EU to go to the US, or leaving the US to go to the EU? So put your hands up if you think leaving the EU to go to the US. Okay. We have about half the room. Okay, and what about leaving the US to go to the EU? Okay, I'd say we have slightly more, and that's probably because you know where I was going with this question. This is to say that The Economist recently published a graph to say that this has recently changed. So of course, traditionally, like most tech workers are leaving the EU to go to the US. They're finding higher salaries. And this is like there's a bit of a tech brain drain from Europe. But this has switched around recently with all the updates, in geopolitics, in the US administration, etc. So I want to pass this sort of idea to Gregory and say, is this something that you've witnessed, or does this seem shocking to you? And tell me a little bit about your experience with the talent shift between the EU and the US.
Yeah, there is absolutely no surprise about that, and that's exactly what we are seeing on the ground. We see more and more people moving from the Bay Area, and not only for values or maybe changing the country, not only about technology but political stuff, but also because we are just out of big waves of firing people here in the Bay Area. I don't know if you heard about that. It's almost 200,000 people that were fired from their work. It's really a big change. A lot of people are scared, Ellie, also, to be honest with you, because you got, in the same time, this technology doing more and more, and a company that want to to move more on profits, and profits are maybe also because thanks to the COVID time, there are maybe too much people. You know, there is kind of regulation or maybe normalization, to be honest with you. There is no 1 week where you don't try to help friends to move to another job or maybe just to move back in Europe.
Great, yeah, thanks a lot for that, Gregory. Anybody else wanting to weigh in on this talent shift between the EU and the US? And if not, we can move on to the next question.
I mean,
maybe I can say that it's good that it's an opportunity for Europe, of course. I mean, we have to grab this one. And we need to attract brilliant brains in Europe.
Yeah.
That is something we absolutely need. So I hope, and I think Macron did quite a lot in France to attract these brains, but I think Europe as a whole should even do more to have more fiscal incentives also to attract these people.
Yeah. Sir?
Yeah, just an interjection to say that for anyone interested in following these trends, we have a partnership with LinkedIn where we follow sort of real time what the movements are in the labor force. So feel free to visit those.
Great.
And we're seeing similar, trends, of course.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I agree with the point that this is a good trend to see, but we should build up on this and do more. For example, things like making it much easier to immigrate to Europe, like visa, making it much quicker to do that. Like specific practical things that these talented tech workers care about, and not just whether they're able to make enough money. That's not the only thing. There are other bureaucratic elements.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So maybe sticking a bit with the theme of talent, but taking it to the public sector. Imogen, can I bring you in here to ask about? You mentioned the UK AI Security Institute in the UK. I think it's fair to say that this is seen as really a flagship center of public sector frontier AI expertise. And I just wonder, what do you think was really important for the UK AC to get right here to really sort of like attract top-level talent and ensure that this expertise is not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector to shape norms and build the right safeguards and whatnot?
Yeah, great question. And just for context, I was one of the kind of founding seniors in the Security Institute, where I led the international and kind of governance work for a couple of years. So in my view, the kind of top things that meant that we were able to set up AC and kind of attract really top talent. So AC has our CTO is Jade Leung, who used to work at OpenAI. We've got Jeffrey Irving, who was senior at GDM. We've got lots and lots of technical folk who've come from all of the labs. And we also have sort of very, very high caliber civil servants in AC from like Ollie Eilert, who was the director until he got a promotion, was the number 2 and number 10 for a long time. So I'd say what enabled us to do that and to move quickly, I think first of all, landing a couple of really senior, effective hires was very, very important. So Ollie and Jade in particular. 2, pay flexibility. So in the public sector, they're very kind of, defined pay rules. And we aren't able to pay what the frontier labs can pay. But it was important that we could pay more than the kind of average civil servant salary to attract people. And then I guess 3, there's something about kind of setting a conversation. Like I think one of the attractions for people to come to UK AC was that we hosted the Bletchley Park Summit, that we were the first UK Security Institute, that we landed the ability for governments to test models at Bletchley Park, and that there's a lot of people, I'm sure many people in the audience, who really care about the AI governance debate and about making kind of the future of this technology go well, and by kind of positioning the UK government and the UK AI Security Institute as somewhere where you could come and really meaningfully move the dial on those things.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Imogen, go ahead, Risto.
Great question and great discussion on this.
I want some disagreement as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll maybe mention that I think there's already some collaboration happening between UK AC and EU AI office, but I think it's not at least visibly clear that there's a lot of collaboration. I wish there was much more collaboration between them. UK has a lead in terms of technical expertise, and they've done much more work on that front. However, the EU has a bigger lead in terms of actually starting to implement the regulation and enforcing it and putting those practices and those ideas into concrete deliverables and practices. So it's very important to use some of that expertise, technical insight, but actually make it happen and do something in the real world. So that's a big important thing. And I think the UK could also do much more to continue building upon the AI safety report, which is essentially now it came out the second version. There's 2 editions, basically an IPCC report for AI safety, one of the unique international reports and kind of knowledge sharing opportunities. I think the UK AC could do a lot more to share that with the EU AI office and just like internationally and build up on that and continue doing that.
Yes, go ahead, Johan.
So I have a number of things to comment. So first of all, to add to what Imogen said, I think there is also the aspect that there are people who may have been working in the public sector, private sector, also getting very high salaries for their work, who are interested in actually doing something new and groundbreaking. And we have an AI safety unit in the AI office, and in our hiring, we've seen that it resonates with people to do something which is groundbreaking. So create the rules, the concrete rules related to the implementation of the AI Act. We have also had lots of people from the process, also a number of people from the UK AI Safety or Security Institute who joined us, and so there seems to be not just a remuneration which is driving people, although obviously it's very hard to resist a big check. Or maybe once you've enjoyed a big check for a number of years, you can sort of relax and do other things which are perhaps then more related to what you really want to move forward. If I may, I'd like to comment on some of the things. So Risto, a number of things you said are actually going on. We just don't make a lot of fuss about it. So
make more fuss.
No, that has downsides as well. So, I'm old enough to remember the time when there was quality media and quality journalism. That's not the case anymore, I'm afraid. To all intents and purposes, there. We prefer to surprise on the upside. And first of all, the cooperation with other countries, I mean, this is very much going on. We are talking to the Koreans almost every week. They have their AI law. We are talking to the Brazilians regularly. We are talking to others all the time. So all of this that you said we should do, we are doing it. As regards the AI safety report, actually the UK, and Imogen, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually would disown it, saying it's not a UK thing, and it is actually not a UK thing. We are actually reading it, and we are involved in it. I'm actually personally on the advisory body of that AI safety report, because those who were invited to contribute to it, those basically who were invited to the Bletchley Summit, they had the chance to appoint experts and also government representatives, which I am, to the advisory body. I would also like to comment on what Ferdinand said, because I actually agree on almost everything you said. I think you raised very good points about a number of the things. Though actually we do not see ourselves as a middle power in the European Union, I think we should aim higher than that, and I think we are more than a middle power. But as such, of course, I think Kari made a very, very good speech. Physical AI. I used to be running the AI robotics unit, so that's very close to my heart in that sense, even if it's now years away. And this is something where indeed we are actually working on that silently behind the scenes again. One thing we are very bad at is hype. So this is something that the European Union or the European Commission doesn't do so well, and this is also related to the thing that we may be seen to have an inferiority complex in Europe, as Risto said. This is maybe how it seems, but this is also because things are polarized by the media in a way. But yes, physical AI, very important. I think we have real assets there in Europe because we have a very strong robotics sector. Again, not so very well known, but we have all kinds of robotics. We have 90% market share of some of the service robotics areas, which are not necessarily so well known. Some of them may seem pedestrian, like milking robots, but that's actually hugely important for the economy. Farmers even get to go on holiday. So, you know, there are these things. I grew up on a farm, so I know what it is like to work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So, you know, a very important point. Thanks for making that.
Great, yeah. So maybe could there be a DG hype? Could we bring that into the commission? Is that possible? Okay, that was a joke.
I'm not in charge of deciding the structure of the European Commission.
Okay, you wanted to comment on that, Risto?
Just very quickly, I understand that there can be downsides to hype and communication and so on, but I think that's one thing that UKAC has done much better. It's part of why they have been able to attract talented people. For example, when I was at Stanford, I noticed that everybody had like 3 different logos on their shirts. Like you met with a janitor somewhere, they had like 3 logos here and there. And I think Europeans are not very good at hyping things and communicating and marketing things, and I think we can definitely improve upon that.
Okay, so maybe one more thing that we'll move on to different topics. So maybe questions in about 5 minutes. So please, everyone, warm up your questions. We'll get to them in just a second. On the topic, Sarah, I want to address this one to you. I think a lot of people, you know, we've mentioned middle powers a few times in this panel, but the OECD was doing a lot of coordination work. We saw kind of a quite funny article from Politico recently saying that the French foreign minister is suggesting that Canada should join the EU because technically there's like no territorial requirements in the treaties. So this is obviously a bit of a joke, but you know, this is really highlighting the importance of middle powers. And I want to ask Sarah, what do you see as like the core focus of middle powers? Do you see it as governance and norm sharing and standards? Do you see it as the infrastructure itself and kind of having these positive interdependencies between like-minded partners, or both?
Thank you very much. No, I mean, just to say we, as I said, benefit from being the platform for conversations among this broad set of countries. You mentioned Korea, Juha, like I mentioned, Saudi Arabia as part of another region. And we're very much hearing both as being central that countries are looking to find allies in this space. And as I mentioned, there's really sort of a look at the infrastructure and trying to figure out, because it's likely not feasible for certain countries to own the whole stack, right? This notion of sovereignty. So how do you then go about that? So that's why we've started looking a lot at compute as a specific aspect of the stack. There's obviously also other aspects. And then, you know, being in India, it was interesting to see there's still a lot of conversation around, and you mentioned the Bletchley Summit, which was obviously a safety summit that moved on to an action summit in Paris and then to an impact summit. Safety was still very much in India, but then we're also seeing sort of a shift to looking at impact, right? So how can we take these tools that are safe and trusted and deploy them in ways that actually deliver? And I thought that conversation was really enriching because that's a very different context where the energy conversation is relevant, but in different ways, right? And the impacts are also very different needs that are present there. So just, and I wanted to mention there from the OECD's perspective that we really try to reach out. So that conversation isn't just a European conversation or a European plus, but we've convened these co-creation workshops both in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and now most recently on the African continent, to bring government experts together and try to see how they themselves can work to develop frameworks to promote trustworthy AI in their settings. And so this is really, I know this is something we want to discuss as well on co-creation, and not just how do we export to other markets, but how do we actually build together. And I think that's a more effective way of building those partnerships. I wanted to sneak that in case we didn't get to it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe just before we ask questions, I'll ask a question that can be like a yes, no, or it's more complicated than that answer. Something that Pascal mentioned is that China is pursuing a lot this more sort of like domain-specific AI, so really like very specific applications, whereas the US is going for this kind of scaling approach, searching for what what some people call AGI, to kind of basically do everything. I wonder, should Europe sort of really like try and pick one of these two, or do something more different than this, and really just a yes, no, or it's more complicated than that answer? Let's go with Ferdinand first.
Yeah. For me, I think really that we have the strengths. I mean, Europe is a manufacturing powerhouse.
Yes.
I mean, let's build on this strength. And for this physical AI approach, you need smaller models. I mean, it's just smaller models. When you look at the models of Yann LeCun, that's between 1 and 10 billion parameters. That's nothing. I mean, the LLMs, the state-of-the-art LLMs, it's about 2 trillion parameters.
Okay. So this would be a yes.
Yes.
Yes to the EU taking this approach. Okay. We'll move on to audience questions, because I know there's probably some burning questions in the audience. So please, we have this fun dice with a microphone built in that we'll throw around. So please, let us know your question.
Okay. Is it working? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you all. I wanted to narrow down a little bit on open source, or at least open weight AI models. And first, maybe get a quick reaction. What's your general opinion on that? And then the follow-up question, if there's a positive opinion, should we publicly fund this kind of approach? How should we go forward in that direction if you think Europe should go into that direction? Thank you.
Yeah, I can maybe say something about that. It's a very good question, thank you, because you mentioned also the open weight models, because a lot of people only speak about the open source, and DeepSeek is not a full open source model. You don't have access to the training data, you don't have access to the tools that they have used. So it's not a full open source. I think Olmo is the only full open source model, at least I know. The open weight models are quite interesting. If you take Minimax, also mentioned in one of the slides of Pascal, it's from China. It's open weight. You can adapt the weights in the model, but then you can put that model in physical hardware, on-premise, I would say, so that you have a full, secure, sovereign solution. So we have to work more with this kind of models, I think. And if it has to be subsidized or this, I don't know. But I think there's a way to go there that we can already create a kind of sovereignty for our companies, I mean more on company level, with this kind of models.
Maybe a very quick another reaction to open source. Go ahead.
Maybe I'll just say that there are pros and cons to open source or open models. Definitely one pro can be this kind of sovereignty argument that you can ensure full privacy, you can have a local large language model, for example, and so on. That can be a strong advantage. A downside can be if you don't pay attention to safety enough and you create a very capable open model and you release it to the public, then you're not able to go into control the safeguards as well as if it was behind the API. So it depends on also what kind of capabilities the open model has. So it can be pros and cons.
Just a comment, overall, we are favorable to it, and we're actually already supporting. So if you look up Open Euro LLM, so basically it is a project which develops a family of large language models for European languages.
And just from the OECD's perspective, if I may, we're definitely seeing interest in this. We had an event also in India on this, so we launched an open call for open source, open weight models, so that you'll find them soon on our catalog on tools and metrics on our website. And we're also looking into, just to be able to contribute to this debate, sort of what are the economic and societal benefits of these kind of models.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Maybe very quickly, Gregory, and then we'll go to the next question. Quick one, Gregory.
Yeah, globally open source, I think, is really the way to go. First one, and we need to be super careful about guardrails. One of the points that we didn't discuss here is about children or kids, and that's what we are supporting in our non-profit. And it's super important to think about when you are deploying these kind of models, whether they are open source or not. You definitely need to make sure that you are bringing to them guardrails, and that you will take care about anthropomorphism, sycophancies, this kind of stuff, because we saw the story over the last months in US mainly. So if we can try to avoid, that would be great.
Yes. Okay, great. Imogen, very, very quickly on open source, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we also are very keen to be the home of global open source AI talent. We take AI open source very seriously, and we've got tools, including via our AI Security Institute, that build open source infrastructure. So, for instance, our Inspect.
Great. Okay. Next question from the audience. Yes, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Tito Teunens from the Science Policy Office of Belgium. Thank you very much for the rich discussion we had today. My question is about, we speak about sovereignty at the moment, and this is quite linked to the stresses of geopolitical turmoil. But when we think on the long term, we also have other stresses, such as the triple planetary crisis. How is resilience, adaptability, and sustainability included into the sovereignty discussion?
Great question. So sustainability and sovereignty. Maybe, Sarah, you mentioned energy conversations in India. Was this part of it? Or if anyone else wants to...
Maybe
go ahead, Fernand.
I can say something, because we see a lot of developments in that field. You will, I mean, even in Europe, you have now startups working on energy-efficient chips. So there's a big evolution on that part. But that's more the technological answer, I would say. You have then, everybody has to take his responsibility in this debate. But also by making the choices, for example, to go for more physical AI and the smaller models. These models, they just use less energy than the big ones. So it's more affordable for us. I mean, it's interlinked with the choices that Europe has to make, I think.
Yeah. I think maybe something to add there is also that the first step for these things is transparency. So it would be really good for laws to basically, or rules to say, well, you know, a company needs to be transparent about how much water they're using, how much energy they're using. So at least we have a evidence-based approach to dealing with the sustainability issues. Sorry for taking my moderator privilege there.
Well, another aspect is also research, because this is something we have funded. So frugal AI models, and this is something that is ongoing work in the research community to see how things could be, how models could be developed, how AI could be developed with less data, less energy. These are some of the important conversations that are going on in the research space.
Great, thanks, Juha. Okay, so maybe one more question in the room, and then online, if there are questions, we can maybe go to that afterwards. We have one over here on the left, and then maybe afterwards one from online, if there are some questions coming through. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm not a good English speaker, so I translate with Gemini.
Using AI?
No. Yes. So we talk about the bad communication of Europe, and Gregory said an interesting thing about the co-workers, the agent co-workers. So is there a coordinated European communication strategy to reassure both developer and industrial workers with AI? So it will be a tool for collaboration, rather an replacement for human labor.
Okay, so the question is, how is Europe communicating about this new sort of agentic workforce, that how AI could potentially like augment work or replace work, and how is the EU communicating about this? Maybe you have from the Commission, would you have something to say on this? And if not, anyone else from the panel, feel free to jump in.
Not really. I'm not sure I fully understood the question. So
in terms of something that Gregory mentioned earlier, was this sort of like transition from agentic AI that can do a lot of things to really like a worker AI, so like a drop-in remote worker, and what sort of ramifications that might have for the economy, but also for work in general. Does the EU have some sort of communication strategy for this, or how it will affect workers or the economy?
Well, one of the important things we do, of course, is we're following this very closely to get data and get evidence to see where we are really heading. I mean, one of the things that I've seen over the past 10 years or so has been this kind of conversation about the number of jobs lost and the labor market impact of things. We don't have a proper picture of that. I mean, things probably have changed now with agentic AI and certainly already with generative AI. But before, already there was some confusion about how much AI or robotics are going to make people redundant, because there's also the other side, which is the job creation aspect. And of course, typically these are a bit different in the sense that the job creation tends to be distributed, whereas the job losses tend to be more concentrated. Mm-hmm. The OECD has probably much more to say about this. Without wanting to put you on the spot, Sarah, but this is something that obviously is quite important to gather evidence.
Great. Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah. Risto, maybe very quickly, and then we'll go online after that.
Yeah, I just agree with the idea that we should monitor and pay attention to what is happening, and I don't know if the EU is doing enough of a job here. Because, for example, you can look at the US and some of the big CEOs of these AI companies, like the CEO of OpenAI or OpenAI itself, or Anthropic's CEO, Dario Amodei. They are pursuing what they call artificial general intelligence, or sometimes even talk about superintelligence. And the way they define it is basically AI that is able to do all economic tasks better than humans, all jobs better than humans. They're basically going for replacement AI or something. And of course, there's an objection that they're overhyping the technology to bring investments in and so on, but we should pay attention to that. Is that something we as society want? And like, do we want us to be replaced, or do you want us to be augmented and our jobs to be better using AI?
Okay, thanks for that. So now let's go online.
Okay, we have.
Thank you for this.
No, as in, sorry, to the online audience, they'll ask the next question. So Imogen, if you have an answer for that, we'll go to you first. Go ahead.
Okay, we have two quite similar questions. First question, at what point does choosing which parts of the value chain to own become a polite euphemism for ceding the only part that matters, frontier intelligence, to an AGI that will eventually outgovern? Second question, does Europe need a Manhattan Project-style mobilization of compute and energy to own a piece of AGI?
Okay, I think we'll take those questions together because they're quite related. Does anyone from the panel want to address this question about, sort of a public sector push for AGI, or the fact that kind of talking about sovereignty as something that is sort of lost is already sort of a lost cause for Europe because they need to pursue this themselves? Quite a tough one to address.
So we are providing the wherewithal. We are supporting the building of the infrastructure, as I said. We are not developing agentic AI. We are not developing AI models directly. So this is done by the people in the field, the practitioners who are doing that. But of course, as I mentioned, we do find it important to make sure that we have the support also in terms of funding for the required infrastructure, not just compute, but also data and other things. And skills, talent was mentioned many times. These are some of the key, maybe the most important key components of it.
Great. maybe from the, no, okay. Imogen, would you like to come in on this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think this is like, obviously a very important question. I think for the UK, as our Chancellor set out in her speech on Tuesday, for us, we want to chart our own path where an active and strategic state can protect British interests through AI sovereignty, but with a lot of clarity, because it's very easy to kind of go after everything and go after nothing. So first, our goal is to build sufficient compute to protect our interests and avoid excessive dependence on others. Second, we want to establish our foothold and compete fiercely in the areas where we have real unique strengths, so AI applications, AI chip design, cybersecurity. And third, to maximize the value added by AI to the wider economy and the public sector through accelerated adoption. And finally, fourth, and very, very importantly, and this links to the last question and why I had my hand up for that, we really want to equip working people with the tools they need to maximize the rewards and minimize the risks. And on that fourth one, just to kind of explain a bit what we're doing, we are upskilling 10 million workers with AI capabilities. We think it's essential that our workers understand how to use AI, how to get the most from it in order for us to be able to adopt and kind of benefit from AI. But second, we've stood up our Future of Work unit, which I think is kind of one of the first of its kind in kind of globally, to do research and to really understand the impact of kind of frontier AI, agentic AI, on the jobs market and to develop policy solutions working across government.
Great, thanks a lot, Imogen. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the panel. So to say some words to kind of summarize what we've discussed, we've touched on so many topics. We started with China, we went to skills, how the EU may be attracting more tech talent than before. We've touched on international collaboration, the role of middle powers, an emerging role that they might shape in, for example, geopolitics. We've touched on different approaches to industrial AI on the technical level, so moving away from scaling and moving towards things like world models and more sort of cost-effective and targeted approaches. So yeah, really a lot of food for thought. I want to thank the audience a lot for bearing with us and for the great questions. And thank you so much to our panelists. Gregory, it is 4 a.m. in San Francisco. You are a champion. You've powered through. You can go to sleep now. Imogen, thanks a lot for connecting from the UK. Thanks a lot, Sarah, as well, for coming from Paris, Risto as well, and Ferdinand and Juha. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks a lot to the organizers of this conference as well. Thanks for everything.
Okay, thank you.